Happens. There is a quiet feeling that follows many INFJs wherever they go. It can appear while they are sitting alone in their bedroom, but strangely, it can become even stronger when they are surrounded by people. Happens. They may be standing in the middle of a crowded party, laughing at the right moments, responding politely, and appearing completely comfortable, yet somewhere deep inside. Happens. They still feel as if they are watching the entire scene from behind an invisible wall. They are physically present, but part of their mind remains outside the moment, observing everything from a distance. Happens. This does not mean INFJs hate people. It does not mean they are socially awkward, cold, or incapable of enjoying themselves. In fact, many INFJs can be warm, charming, humorous. Happens. And surprisingly outgoing. They may know exactly how to make others feel welcomed. They can adjust their tone, read the atmosphere, and become the person the situation seems to require. Happens. But for many of them, this social side feels less like a permanent personality and more like a switch they consciously turn on. When the switch is activated, they participate. Happens. Smile, listen, and connect. When it is finally turned off, they often need silence to recover and return to themselves. The reason INFJs frequently feel out of sync with the world is not that they are trying to be different. Happens. It is because their minds naturally process reality through deeper layers of meaning. While other people may simply enjoy a conversation, an INFJ is often noticing everything underneath it. Happens. They hear the words being spoken, but they also notice the pause before the answer. They see the smile, but they wonder whether it reached the person's eyes. They listen to the joke. Happens. But part of their mind is asking why the person needed to make that joke in the first place. While everyone else is focused on what is happening, the INFJ is often focused on what it means. Happens. Why did that person suddenly become quieter? Why did those two people avoid looking at each other? Why does this happy relationship feel emotionally distant? Happens. Why does everyone seem to be enjoying themselves while something in the room still feels strangely heavy? For an INFJ, the world is rarely just what it appears to be on the surface. Happens. Every expression can contain a hidden emotion. Every conversation can carry an unspoken message. Every relationship can reveal a deeper pattern. Their minds constantly search for connections between what people say. Happens. What people feel and what people are trying not to reveal. This can make ordinary experiences feel unusually intense. Imagine walking into a cafe with a group of friends. Most people notice the music. Happens. The food, the decorations, and the energy of the room. An INFJ may notice those things too, but their attention quickly moves somewhere deeper. They notice that one friend is smiling more than usual. Happens. Almost as if they are trying to prove they are okay. They notice another person checking their phone every few seconds, perhaps waiting for a message that never comes. Happens. They notice a couple sitting nearby who are speaking politely but no longer seem emotionally connected. No one has explained these things to them. The INFJ simply senses that there is more happening than what is being said out loud. Happens. Over time, this way of processing life can create a strange kind of loneliness. It is not always the loneliness of having nobody around. Happens. Sometimes it is the loneliness of being surrounded by people but feeling that nobody else is experiencing the moment in the same way. The INFJ may want to explain what they noticed. Happens. But they often hesitate. They know that if they speak too honestly, other people may say they are overthinking, being too sensitive, or making something deeper than it really is. Happens. So they stay quiet. They learn to participate without revealing everything they are thinking. They laugh with everyone else while privately analyzing the emotional atmosphere. Happens. They become skilled at blending in, even when they do not feel that they truly belong. From the outside, they may seem calm and socially capable. On the inside. Happens. They may feel like a visitor studying a world they understand deeply but never completely enter. This is why many INFJs grow up believing there is something wrong with them. They wonder why simple conversations feel exhausting. Happens. They question why they cannot enjoy certain situations without analyzing them. They may envy people who seem able to live completely in the present without searching for hidden meanings. Happens. But the truth is that this difference is not necessarily a flaw. The INFJ mind is designed to notice patterns, emotional contradictions, and possibilities that others may overlook. Happens. That ability can help them understand people, anticipate problems, create meaningful art, build deep relationships, and recognize truths that have not yet been spoken. Happens. Their sense of being different often comes from the same inner depth that allows them to see the world with unusual clarity. The challenge is learning not to confuse being different with being disconnected. Happens. INFJs do not need to force themselves to become shallow in order to belong. They do not need to silence their inner world just to match the emotional rhythm of everyone around them. Happens. But they must also remember that not every smile hides pain, not every silence contains a secret, and not every moment needs to be analyzed. Sometimes life is allowed to be simple. Happens. Sometimes a joke is only a joke. Sometimes a quiet person is merely tired. Sometimes happiness does not need to have a hidden explanation. The goal is not for INFJs to stop seeing deeply. Happens. The goal is to learn when to use that depth and when to let themselves simply experience the moment. Because INFJs are not distant because they dislike people. Happens. They often feel distant because their minds are listening to several emotional conversations at the same time, including the ones nobody is saying out loud. And once they understand this, happens, they can stop judging themselves for feeling different. They are not broken. They are not incapable of belonging. They are simply tuned into a deeper frequency. Happens. The real journey is learning how to remain connected to that depth without allowing it to separate them from the world they are trying so hard to understand. Happens. And once you understand that INFJs are often tuned into a deeper emotional frequency, the next question becomes obvious. How do they notice things that everyone else seems to miss? Happens. One of the most defining features of the INFJ personality is introverted intuition, often called NI. It is the mental process that helps them connect scattered details, recognize hidden patterns. Happens. And sense where a situation may be heading before there is enough visible evidence to explain it logically. You may have experienced this before. You meet someone who appears friendly. Happens. Polite and completely normal. They say all the right things. Nothing about their behavior seems obviously dangerous. Yet somewhere inside you, a quiet warning begins to rise. Happens. Something feels wrong. You cannot point to one clear reason. You may not have proof. You may even feel guilty for judging the person too quickly, so you ignore the feeling, tell yourself you are overthinking. Happens. And try to act rationally. Then weeks or months later, something happens that confirms the discomfort you felt from the beginning. And your first thought is often, I knew something was off. Happens. But this does not necessarily mean INFJs possess supernatural powers or can predict the future. What feels mysterious on the surface may actually be the result of extremely fast subconscious pattern recognition. Happens. Imagine the mind as a quiet computer running in the background. While your conscious attention is focused on the conversation, another part of your brain is collecting tiny pieces of information. Happens. It notices that someone looked away before answering a simple question. It records the half-second pause that did not fit the rhythm of the conversation. It hears the slight change in their voice when a certain topic is mentioned. Happens. It sees that their smile appears at the correct moment but disappears too quickly. Individually, these details may seem meaningless. Together, they can form a pattern. Most people may register one or two of these signals and immediately forget them. Happens. But an INFJ's mind often stores them, compares them with previous experiences, and connects them without conscious effort. Then, instead of presenting a full report with evidence and calculations, happens. The mind sends one simple conclusion. Be careful, something is being hidden. This person is not as comfortable as they appear. The strange part is that INFJs often receive the answer without seeing the entire process that created it. Happens. They get the final result, but not the hidden equation. That is why explaining their intuition can be frustrating. Someone may ask, why don't you trust this person? And the INFJ may only be able to say, happens. I don't know, it is just a feeling to other people. This can sound irrational, but the feeling may be based on dozens of subtle contradictions that the INFJ noticed without consciously naming them. Happens. The word sounded friendly, but the body stayed guarded. The promise sounded sincere, but the behavior did not match previous actions. The person said everything was fine, but they're breathing. Happens. Posture and timing suggested something else. INFJs are often sensitive to inconsistency. They notice when someone's message becomes unusually short. They notice when a person who normally uses warm language suddenly responds with only one word. Happens. They notice when a friend says I'm okay but avoids eye contact. They notice when laughter sounds slightly forced, or when someone becomes unusually cheerful in a way that feels more like a performance than genuine happiness. Happens. These details do not always mean something is wrong. A person may simply be tired, distracted, or having a difficult day. INFJ intuition is not perfect, and it should never be treated as unquestionable truth. Happens. But because their minds are constantly comparing emotional signals and behavioral patterns, they often detect changes before other people do. Happens. This ability becomes even more powerful when INFJs try to understand the motivation beneath someone else's behavior. When another person becomes angry, most people naturally react to the anger itself. Happens. They see the raised voice, the harsh words, or the aggressive posture and immediately think, this person is difficult. An INFJ may see the same behavior, but another question quickly appears. Happens. What pain is underneath this anger? What fear is this person trying to protect? What happened to them that made this reaction feel necessary? This does not mean INFJs excuse harmful behavior. Happens. Understanding why someone became hurtful does not mean accepting mistreatment, but they often cannot stop themselves from looking beyond the surface. They may see arrogance and recognize insecurity beneath it. Happens. They may see constant attention-seeking and wonder whether the person grew up feeling invisible. They may see emotional distance and sense that closeness once became dangerous for that individual. Happens. They may see someone controlling every detail and recognize a deep fear of losing stability. This is one reason people often feel unusually understood around INFJs. An INFJ may listen to a person describe a problem. Happens. Notice the emotion hidden beneath the story and ask the one question that reaches the real wound. Sometimes that can feel comforting. Sometimes it can feel almost frightening. Happens. Because many people are used to being heard at the level of their words. They are not used to someone noticing the emotion they were trying to hide behind those words, however. Happens. This gift also carries a risk. When you are good at seeing the pain behind bad behavior, you may stay too long in situations that are hurting you. You may keep explaining someone's cruelty through their childhood wounds. Happens. You may continue forgiving manipulation because you understand the fear behind it. You may confuse understanding a person with being responsible for saving them. That is why intuition must always be paired with boundaries. Happens. You can recognize someone's pain and still protect yourself. You can understand their motives without accepting their behavior. You can feel compassion for what shaped them without allowing them to damage your life. Happens. The strength of intuition is not that it allows them to read minds. It is that they often recognize emotional patterns, contradictions, and subtle signals that others overlook. Happens. Their minds quietly gather fragments, connect them beneath conscious awareness, and return a feeling that something deserves attention. The goal is not to blindly trust every feeling. Happens. The goal is to treat intuition as a signal, then look for evidence. Because intuition can open the door, but reality must still confirm what is on the other side. And when an INFJ learns to balance deep perception with clear judgment, happens. Their intuition stops being a confusing inner alarm and becomes one of their most powerful tools for understanding people, protecting their energy, and making wiser decisions. Happens. And this is where the INFJ experience becomes even more intense. Their intuition does not simply help them recognize what another person may be feeling. Sometimes it causes them to carry that feeling inside their own body. Happens. An INFJ may enter a room feeling calm, balanced, and completely normal, but within a few minutes something begins to change. Their chest becomes tight, their shoulders feel heavier. Happens. Their energy suddenly drops, even though nobody has openly said that anything is wrong. The room may appear peaceful on the surface, but perhaps two people have just finished an argument. Happens. Maybe someone is hiding anxiety behind a polite smile. Maybe another person is silently angry, disappointed, or emotionally overwhelmed, even when the tension remains unspoken. Happens. The INFJ often senses it. And the strange part is that they may begin feeling the emotion before they understand where it came from. They walk into the room calm and leave feeling anxious. Happens. They sit beside someone who is grieving and later feel sadness following them home. They spend an hour listening to a frustrated friend, and afterward their own body feels as if it has been carrying the frustration all day. Happens. This is one of the most exhausting parts of deep empathy. INFJs do not always observe emotions from a safe distance. They may absorb them. It can feel as though their emotional boundaries are made from a material that is too thin. Happens. Other people's moods pass through easily. Their nervous system begins mirroring the atmosphere around them, sometimes so quickly that they struggle to distinguish between what belongs to them and what belongs to someone else. Happens. They may suddenly ask themselves, why do I feel so heavy? But the better question may be, was I feeling this before I entered the room? When INFJs spend time around warm, sincere. Happens. And emotionally stable people, this sensitivity can feel beautiful. They may leave a meaningful conversation feeling hopeful, energized, and more connected to life. Someone else's enthusiasm can awaken their own motivation. Happens. Genuine kindness can restore their faith in people. A peaceful environment can help their entire nervous system relax. But the opposite is also true when they remain around people who constantly complain. Happens. Manipulate, create conflict, or demand emotional attention. Their energy can disappear rapidly. They may listen patiently, offer thoughtful advice, and appear completely composed. Happens. Yet inside, their emotional battery is draining with every sentence. This does not necessarily happen because they are weak. It happens because they are processing more than the words being spoken. Happens. They are listening to the story, but they are also feeling the anger beneath it. They are noticing the fear hidden inside the complaint. They are measuring the emotional pressure in the room. Happens. Watching changes in body language and trying to understand what every person needs. A simple interaction can become an enormous amount of invisible emotional work. This is also why many INFJs feel exhausted by shallow conversation. Happens. It is not always because they believe ordinary topics are meaningless or because they think they are intellectually superior. The problem is that surface-level interaction still requires social energy. Happens. But it rarely gives them the emotional connection that restores that energy. They can spend hours at a party discussing the weather, someone's outfit, workplace gossip, or the latest trend and leave feeling strangely empty. Happens. They may have spoken to many people, smiled often, and appeared socially successful. Yet none of those conversations reached the part of them that was actually looking for connection. Happens. To an INFJ, talking is not automatically the same as connecting. They may remain silent for most of a crowded gathering, standing near the edge of the room and observing everyone else. Happens. Some people may assume they are bored, shy, or uninterested. But then one sincere person begins asking real questions, and something changes. The INFJ comes fully present. Happens. The conversation moves away from polite social performance and toward the things people usually keep hidden. They begin talking about the meaning of life, the experiences that shape them. Happens. The childhood wounds they are still trying to understand, and the dreams they are afraid to say out loud. They may discuss why people repeat destructive patterns, what makes a life meaningful. Happens. Why society rewards certain behaviors, whether human beings can truly change, or what our existence means inside an enormous universe. Suddenly, the person who barely spoke all evening can continue talking until 3 in the morning. Happens. Their posture becomes more open, their energy returns, their eyes become more focused. It is as if someone has finally reached the correct door and entered the private world that was hidden behind their silence. Happens. This is the kind of conversation INFJs crave, not because every interaction must be serious or emotionally heavy, but because they want authenticity. They want to feel that both people are present without performing. Happens. They want to move beyond rehearsed answers and discover what someone truly thinks, fears, values, and hopes for. They are not searching for endless intensity. They are searching for something real. Happens. That is why INFJs may have a small social circle. They do not necessarily need dozens of friends, constant invitations, or a crowded contact list. What they usually need is a few relationships in which they can lower their emotional defenses. Happens. They need people who do not punish honesty, people who can listen without immediately judging, people who respect silence instead of treating it as rejection. Happens. People who are willing to explore meaningful questions but can also sit together peacefully without forcing conversation. For an INFJ, emotional safety often matters more than social quantity. Happens. One trustworthy relationship can mean more than 100 casual connections. A small circle can feel like an entire world when the people inside it are sincere. But this desire for depth can also create a difficult expectation. Happens. INFJs may become disappointed when other people do not open up as quickly or deeply as they do. They may interpret ordinary small talk as evidence that a relationship has no potential. Happens. They may withdraw too early because the connection does not immediately feel meaningful. Yet shallow conversation is sometimes not the opposite of depth. Sometimes it is simply the bridge that leads toward it. Happens. Many people need time before they feel safe enough to reveal their inner world. They begin with ordinary subjects because they are quietly testing whether the other person is trustworthy. Happens. The conversation about work, music, or the weather may not be the destination, it may be the doorway. INFJs must learn to respect that process without forcing themselves to remain indefinitely in connections that never grow. Happens. They do not need to give their deepest energy to everyone. They do not need to become the emotional support system for every person who enters their life. Happens. And they do not need to feel guilty for protecting themselves from people whose presence repeatedly leaves them drained. The real skill is learning emotional separation before entering a room. Happens. Notice how you feel. After leaving, check again. Ask yourself what changed and whether the emotion truly belongs to you. Give yourself time alone to release what you may have absorbed. Happens. Rest, write, walk, breathe, listen to music, or sit in silence until your nervous system returns to its own rhythm. Deep empathy becomes sustainable only when it includes the ability to let go. Happens because INFJs are not poor communicators. Many of them can communicate beautifully when the interaction feels honest and meaningful. They simply do not want to spend all their emotional energy performing closeness where no genuine connection exists. Happens. They do not need more people around them. They need the right people with whom silence feels safe, honesty feels welcome, and depth does not have to be hidden. Happens. And when INFJs learn to protect their emotional boundaries while remaining open to sincere connection, their sensitivity stops feeling like an uncontrollable burden. It becomes a bridge. Happens. A bridge that allows them to meet another human being beyond appearances, beyond polite words, and somewhere much closer to the truth. Happens. And once INFJs finally find people who make honesty feel safe, they rarely love them halfway. They listen deeply, remember small details, notice unspoken needs, and often begin caring for the other person before that person even asks for help. Happens. This is one of the most beautiful parts of the INFJ personality, but it can also become one of the most dangerous, because when you can see the pain behind someone's behavior, happens, it becomes difficult to simply walk away from them. You do not only see the harsh words, the emotional distance, or the repeated mistakes, you also see the wounded person underneath. Happens. You see the child who was never heard, the person who learned to hide fear behind anger, the one who became controlling because life once felt completely unstable, and once you understand the reason behind someone's behavior, happens, you may begin feeling responsible for helping them heal. This is how many INFJs slowly become the emotional support system for everyone around them at work. Happens. They may quietly accept the most difficult part of a project because they know the rest of the team is already overwhelmed. They notice what nobody else wants to do, step forward without being asked. Happens, and carry the burden while everyone assumes they are managing perfectly well. In friendships, they may sense that someone is struggling before the person says anything. They send the message first. Happens. They check in, they stay awake late at night listening to the same painful story again. Even when they are exhausted, they often push their own needs aside because another person's pain feels more urgent. Happens. They may tell themselves, I can rest later, but later keeps moving further away. INFJs can become so focused on helping others survive that they forget to ask whether they themselves are still okay. Happens. This tendency is sometimes connected to what people call the rescuer pattern. The INFJ begins to believe that love means understanding endlessly, forgiving repeatedly, and never abandoning someone who is wounded. Happens. They are often drawn toward people who seem broken, misunderstood, emotionally complicated, or in need of guidance. Not because INFJs enjoy suffering, but because they can see the potential hidden behind the damage. Happens. They imagine who the person could become if someone finally loved them correctly. They believe patience may soften the anger. Understanding may heal the fear. Consistency may prove that safe love exists. Happens. Sometimes this care truly helps another person grow. But sometimes the INFJ is not building a relationship. They are accepting a full-time healing project, and that is where the gift becomes a trap. Happens. Some people do not want to change. They only want someone who will keep absorbing the consequences of their choices. They come to the INFJ whenever they need comfort, advice, reassurance. Happens. Money, time, or emotional energy. They take everything available, recover temporarily, and then disappear until the next crisis. These are the people often described as energy vampires. Happens. They rarely ask how the INFJ is feeling. They do not notice the exhaustion behind the patient voice. They become accustomed to receiving support without offering anything meaningful in return. Happens. And because the INFJ understands their wounds, the cycle can continue for a very long time. The person lies, and the INFJ remembers the abandonment that taught them to hide the truth. Happens. The person manipulates, and the INFJ recognizes the fear beneath the need for control. The person repeatedly hurts them, and the INFJ keeps looking for explanations that make the behavior easier to forgive. Happens. Understanding becomes an excuse to stay. Compassion becomes permission for mistreatment, and forgiveness becomes a door through which the same pain keeps returning. This does not happen because INFJs have no boundaries. Happens. In reality, many INFJs have extremely strong boundaries. The problem is that those boundaries may remain invisible for a long time. An INFJ may forgive the same person many times. Happens. They may explain how the behavior hurts them, offer another opportunity, lower their expectations, and keep hoping that the relationship can still be repaired from the outside. Happens. This patience can look endless, but every broken promise is being remembered, every lie is being stored, every moment of disrespect is quietly added to an internal pattern. Happens. The INFJ may not react dramatically to each individual incident because they're still trying to understand the larger picture. They are giving the person time to reveal whether the behavior was a mistake or a permanent part of who they are. Happens. But eventually something changes. It may be one final lie, one more betrayal, one moment in which the INFJ realizes that the person understands the damage they are causing but has chosen to continue anyway. Happens. And suddenly the internal calculation is complete. The relationship is no longer difficult. It is unsafe, it is dishonest, it is beyond repair. This is when the famous INFJ door slam can occur. Happens. To the other person, it may seem sudden. Yesterday, the INFJ was still patient, understanding, and emotionally present. Today, the door is completely closed. Messages go unanswered. Happens. The emotional explanations stop. The warmth disappears. The INFJ no longer argues, begs, or tries to prove how much they were hurt. They simply withdraw the attention, care, hope. Happens. An energy that once kept the relationship alive. But the door slam is rarely created in one moment. It is usually the final stage of a long process that nobody else could see. Happens. The INFJ may have spent months or years warning, forgiving, explaining, and quietly grieving the relationship while still remaining inside it. By the time they physically leave. Happens. They may have already emotionally left many times. This is why their silence can feel so final. It is not always revenge. It is not necessarily hatred. And it is usually not an attempt to punish the other person. Happens. It is often a survival response. The nervous system has finally accepted what the heart resisted for too long. Continuing the relationship requires the INFJ to keep abandoning themselves. Happens. So they stop. They no longer spend energy trying to repair what the other person continues to destroy. They no longer confuse seeing someone as potential with being obligated to wait for that potential forever. Happens. This can make INFJs appear cold, but the coldness is often the absence of emotional investment rather than the presence of cruelty. They are not suddenly incapable of caring. They have simply reached the point where caring is no longer safe. Happens. However, the goal should not be to tolerate everything until a complete door slam becomes the only option. Healthy boundaries should appear much earlier. INFJs must learn that compassion does not require unlimited access. Happens. Understanding someone else's pain does not mean volunteering to become the place where they release it. Forgiveness does not automatically require reconciliation. Happens. And loving a person does not mean repeatedly protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. You can support someone without carrying them. You can listen without becoming their emotional container. Happens. You can recognize their potential without building your life around the person they might become one day. Most importantly, you can leave before you are completely empty, because INFJs can love with extraordinary depth. Happens. They can offer loyalty, patience, insight, and care that changes another person's life. But that love must not be built on self-erasure. The deepest form of compassion is not always staying. Happens. Sometimes it is finally accepting that you cannot heal someone who keeps choosing to hurt you. And when trust has been destroyed beyond repair, leaving is not proof that the INFJ never cared. Happens. Sometimes it is proof that they cared for too long and finally remembered that they are also someone worth protecting. Happens. And once INFJs finally remember that they are also someone worth protecting, the next step is not simply to recognize their patterns. It is to learn how to use their sensitivity without being controlled by it. Happens. Because self-awareness alone is not transformation. You can understand why you overthink, why you absorb emotions, why you give too much, and why you sometimes withdraw completely. Happens. But if that understanding never changes the way you live, it becomes another beautiful idea trapped inside your mind. The real challenge is turning depth into action. And for many INFJs, happens. That journey begins with letting go of perfection. INFJs often carry an ideal version of everything inside their imagination. They can already see how the project should look. Happens. How meaningful the message should feel, how powerful the result could become, and how every detail should fit together perfectly. The vision is beautiful, but it can also become so large that reality feels disappointing before the work even begins. Happens. They open a blank document and imagine the perfect final version. They think about every possible weakness, every mistake someone might notice, and every way the result could fail to match the image in their mind. Happens. So they wait, they research more, they make another plan, they revise the first sentence 20 times, and sometimes happens. They do nothing at all because creating something imperfect feels more painful than keeping the perfect version safely inside their imagination. But the world cannot experience the version that exists only in your head. Happens. A rough beginning is not proof that you lack talent. It is simply the first visible stage of growth. Every meaningful creation begins as something incomplete, uncertain, and smaller than the person's original vision. Happens. You do not need to feel completely ready. You need to begin. Finished is better than perfect because something real can be improved. Something unfinished inside your imagination cannot help anyone. Happens. The second lesson is to stop living only inside your mind. The INFJ inner world can be incredibly rich. It contains possibilities, predictions, emotional patterns, imagined conversations. Happens. And entire future scenarios. But when INFJs spend too much time there, intuition can slowly transform into overthinking. They begin predicting rejection before speaking. They imagine failure before trying. Happens. They analyze every path until none of them feels safe enough to take. But intuition does not become stronger through endless isolation. It becomes more accurate through real experience. Happens. You have to meet people to understand people. You have to make decisions to learn how your judgment works. You have to try, fail, adjust, and try again. Your intuition is a compass. Happens. But your feet are what create the path. A compass can suggest a direction, but it cannot walk for you. And when INFJs avoid real experience because they are afraid of making the wrong choice. Happens. Their inner world becomes filled with predictions that have never been tested against reality. Sometimes the only way to know is to move. The third lesson is to stop waiting for another person to understand you completely. Happens. INFJs often carry a private hope that one day someone will finally see everything. Someone will recognize every hidden feeling, understand every silence, notice every contradiction. Happens. And somehow enter their inner world without needing instructions. But no matter how loving another person may be, nobody can understand a complex human being perfectly. And if your sense of stability depends on being fully understood by someone else. Happens. You may spend your life feeling disappointed. The goal is not to stop wanting connection. The goal is to understand and validate yourself before asking the world to do it for you. Happens. Learn what drains you. Learn what restores you. Learn what values you refuse to betray. Learn what kind of relationships allow you to remain honest when you know who you are. Happens. Other people's opinions become information instead of definitions. Their misunderstanding may still hurt, but it no longer has the power to erase your identity. The fourth lesson is to express what you need. Happens. INFJs often understand other people through subtle signals, so they may unconsciously expect others to do the same for them. They become quiet when hurt, withdraw when overwhelmed. Happens. And hope someone will notice the change. Then when nobody asks what happened, they feel invisible. But most people cannot read emotional patterns as quickly as INFJs do. They may not recognize that your silence means exhaustion. Happens. They may not understand that you need reassurance, space, honesty, or help unless you say it clearly. People cannot respect a boundary they do not know exists. They cannot meet a need you refuse to name. Happens. And they cannot love you in the right way if you require them to guess the instructions. Speaking honestly may feel uncomfortable, especially if you are afraid of being difficult. Happens. Demanding or misunderstood. But expressing a need is not the same as controlling another person. It is giving the relationship a chance to become real. Say, I need time to think. Happens. Say that behavior hurt me. Say I cannot carry this for you. Say I want support, not advice. Clear communication does not make you less intuitive. It prevents intuition from becoming silent resentment. Happens. And the final lesson is to protect your energy before exhaustion forces you to disappear. Imps often wait until they are completely drained before resting. They say yes while their body is asking for silence. Happens. They stay in conversations long after they have stopped feeling present. They continue helping because saying no feels selfish. But rest is not a reward you earn after destroying yourself. Happens. It is maintenance. Learn to leave environments that repeatedly make your nervous system feel unsafe. Learn to limit access to people who only contact you when they need something. Happens. Learn to say no without writing a long explanation designed to make everyone comfortable. Sometimes no is a complete sentence. Give yourself permission to turn off the phone, close the door. Happens. Walk alone, write, read, sleep, or sit in silence without feeling guilty. You do not have to justify every moment of recovery. You cannot be the emotional charging station for the entire world if your own battery is dead. Happens. The goal is not for INFJs to become less sensitive, less compassionate, or less idealistic. Those qualities are part of their strength. The goal is to become grounded enough to use those qualities wisely. Happens. To create instead of endlessly imagining. To experience instead of only predicting. To understand yourself instead of waiting to be perfectly understood. To communicate instead of silently hoping someone will notice. Happens. And to protect your energy before love turns into self-erasure. This is how sensitivity becomes practical power. Not by escaping the real world, but by bringing depth into it. Happens. Not by becoming colder, but by becoming clearer. And not by abandoning the person you naturally are, but by building the discipline, boundaries, and courage required to let that person fully exist. Happens. Because the strongest INFJ is not the one who understands everyone while remaining invisible. It is the one who understands others deeply, understands themselves honestly. Happens. And finally has the courage to build a life where both forms of understanding matter.